Okay, picture this. Your kid is 5 years old. They're just figuring out how to read, right? Maybe finally getting the hang of tying their own shoes. Now, what if I told you their entire educational future could hinge on a single, super tough set of entrance exams? Well, that's the wild, high-stakes reality of Japan's Ojuken. And that really is the question, isn't it? Why on earth would you put a 5-year-old through something that sounds so grueling? It sounds kind of crazy. But we're about to dive into the strategy, the huge stakes, and the, honestly, pretty surprising reasons behind it all. All right, so to really get why this is a thing, we've got to understand the phenomenon itself. What exactly is Ojuken, and how did it get this much power over so many families in Japan? Okay, the word itself is Ojuken, and that little O at the beginning, it's an honorific. That alone tells you just how seriously this is taken. This isn't just some test. It's a formal, all-consuming process to get your kid into a top-tier private or national elementary school, basically letting them sidestep the regular public school system from day one. So, what's the point? Why go through all this chaos? Well, it really comes down to two big reasons. For a lot of parents, it's a strategic play to escape what's known as Japan's exam hell. You know, that non-stop, high-pressure grind for high school and university spots later on. But for others, it's about getting their kid into a school with a totally unique, specialized education that you just can't find in the public system. And that takes us right into the Ojuken arena. Seriously, to really feel the pressure here, you have to look at the odds. So let's step onto the battlefield, because these numbers, they're going to blow you away. I mean, we are talking about competition that is just fierce. Think about it like this. A classroom has, say, 30 spots. Now imagine over 300 5-year-olds are all fighting for one of those seats. That is the actual reality for so many of these top schools. And here's the hard data for the 2025 admissions. This really shows you the frenzy. Look at Tokyo Nodai Inako Elementary, almost 14 applicants for every single spot. For the big names, the legacy schools like Keio and Waseda, it was over 11-1. So yeah, this isn't just an exam. For most people, it's a statistical long shot, and they know it. So what's the prize that everyone is fighting so hard for? It really boils down to a couple of different paths. First, you've got the famous university escalator. If you get your kid into an elementary school that's tied to a major university like Keio or Waseda, you could be looking at a guaranteed spot all the way through college. You completely bypassed all those future exam wars. The other big prize is the experience-focused school. These are places like that Tokyo Nodai Inaka we just saw that use their university connections for amazing hands-on learning. I'm talking rice planting, raising animals, stuff you are just not going to find in a standard curriculum. So how do you win? Well, getting into one of these schools demands this incredible, perfectly coordinated family effort. It's truly an all-in playbook that basically takes over and reshapes the entire family's life. It becomes a full-time job. And this whole thing starts way earlier than you might think. Get this, a whopping 90% of families start their formal Ojuken prep more than a full year before the exam. This is not some last-minute cram session. It's a marathon that usually kicks off when a kid is just 4 years old. And this quote from a parent's blog just says it all. It perfectly captures how much pressure lands on the family, and let's be honest, usually on the mom. This parent wrote, "Our family's Ojuken was 95% my responsibility. I was the one who had to take the lead." She basically had to become the CEO of her own child's future. And to succeed, you need a very specific playbook. First, somebody's got to be the leader, usually one parent, driving the whole thing. They're the one managing the intense juku, or cram school schedule. They're leading the study sessions at home every single day. And, maybe most importantly, they have to stop well-meaning but totally damaging mistakes. Like, one blogger talked about her husband trying to help by showing their daughter a shortcut for using scissors, a technique that was a huge no-no and took weeks to unteach. In the world of Ojuken, even help can set you back. And, you know, it's not all about paper tests. The family interview is a huge deal. Just look at some of these typical questions they ask the kid. They seem so simple, right? What's your favorite game? What happens when you fight with a friend? But they're all designed to get a peek into a child's personality, how they solve problems, and what the family's values are. Even, how did you get here today, isn't about your route. It's testing if the kid is observant and aware of the world around them. And that brings us to one of the biggest interview mistakes you can make. According to the prep school experts, the most common error is a nervous parent who just can't help but jump in and answer for their child. But the schools want to see the kid think for themselves. So the parent's most important job right in that moment is to just stay quiet and trust all that preparation. Okay, so beyond all the time and the emotional energy, there's another massive commitment families have to make, and that is the money. A full-on, comprehensive Ojuken journey from the very beginning to the very end can run you up to 2 million yen. Let me put that in perspective for you. That's about 13,000 US dollars. We're talking about a serious financial investment here, on top of everything else.
So where does all that cash go? The breakdown is pretty eye-opening. The lion's share, around 1.4 million yen, goes straight to tuition for those specialized juku cram schools. The rest? That covers all the required gear, like the famous navy blue suits for the whole family, plus all the materials like mock tests and workbooks. So after all that money, all that stress, and the countless hours of practice, it all boils down to this one huge question. Was it actually worth it?
Look, there are definitely clear pros. For the families that make it, it means getting into an amazing school, a path that lets you skip the future exam stress, and you see your child's abilities just blossom. But the cons are just as real. You've got the huge financial cost, the very real danger of study burnout, and just an immense amount of stress on a really little kid. And maybe the most powerful piece of data comes from surveys of parents who've actually been through it. You know what their number one regret was? It wasn't the money. It wasn't the time. It was losing their temper. One parent said, "We promised not to get angry, but I was the one who broke our promise. I regret scolding them so harshly." Wow. That's a really poignant reminder of the incredible emotional toll this whole thing can take on a family. And that brings us right back to our big question, but maybe on a broader level. The Ojuken system, it's a powerful and, for some, successful strategy in Japan. But it really forces us all to ask, is this kind of intense, early competition really the best way to set a child up for a successful life? Or does it end up sacrificing something absolutely essential about childhood itself? And that's a question with no easy answer.